Today I want to discuss getting old in China. It's not the first time I've discussed it, and it most certainly won't be the last, but recently I went with my local media, Zhongshan Daily or Zhongshan Ribao, to visit some old people's canteens, and that raised a few things that I think are worth mentioning. I got told by a follower in Australia that it's getting really hard to survive if you're older there, and especially so if you live off the government pension. Now, I know a little bit more about the UK because I actually get a pension from the UK government, so I'll talk more about that than Australia. But this is what Jane at Jane New Author had to say to me. I'm retired and on an Australian government pension. It's 1/3 of the average Australian wage and literally on the poverty line. That's pretty tough. I'm lucky, she went on to say. I own my own flat. I have a friend in her 80s who pays 75% of her pension in rent, and this is not unusual here. My reply to that was, unfortunately, Jane, that's very common, and it's an important reason why many retirees decide to live in places like Thailand where they can at least enjoy a good lifestyle. However, the older one gets and the more dependent on others, the harder it is to enjoy that kind of lifestyle. I know several who have done it in the Philippines, Thailand, Vietnam, and even Indonesia. However, I've yet to meet one like myself who got married and was happy for an extended period of time. But that's a different story. In this video, we're talking about living on the old age pension, not on superannuation or some kind of retirement plan, just the OAP, as it's called in the UK. The fact is, in China, you've paid your dues and you get your rewards. It's not to say getting old is great. It never is. Getting old here doesn't mean getting desperate, or worse, getting desperately short of money or living alone and uncared for. Let me explain this. I've got a few experiences here. The full rate of the government pension in the United Kingdom is just £221 a week. That works out at £950 a month for most people. They have something there in the UK that China doesn't have, and that's council taxes. So, for example, residents in a place called Broxbourne, which has the lowest average council tax in England in 2024-25, and that's £158 a year, but they also pay council tax to the Hertfordshire County Council of £1,600. And there isn't a single place in the UK where that doesn't apply. Most homes will be paying a lot more than £2,000 a year in council and or district taxes. And in China, there's no such thing. Now let's take a look at a pensioner, at a person who's my age. I'm 66 years old. Now I own my apartment. I live in it and I own it outright. I paid cash for it because it was cheap and because I was able to save money from my income, something I was never able to do in the UK or in Australia. And this means the bank made no money from my monthly payments, and we'll come to why that is important in a moment. I have no rates, council taxes, property taxes. No one in China does. And because my apartment is not in a secure garden, it doesn't have elevator, there's no swimming pool security or gardens to maintain, there are no other fees. I pay for utilities. My water is never more than 30 RMB a month. My gas never more than 100 RMB a month. And my electricity, even when I have the air conditioner running 24/7, is still under 400 RMB a month. I have no TV, so I don't need to pay for access to that. And there's never been a license fee in China. I think only the UK has that. And that's another £169.50 that a pensioner my age has to find. Over 75, it can be free. And there's a very generous gesture on the part of the British government. You can apply for a free license if you're blind and can't watch TV. Electricity fees in the UK are about the highest in the developed world, and they have a cap in the UK of £1,717. That's £143 a month, plus standing charges of 66p a day. But as the website points out, that's not a total figure, but a cap. And only if you remain under what they define as typical usage. If you use too much, you pay more. And you have to pay standing charges. Something else we don't have in China. If I leave my apartment empty, switch off all the devices, go away for several months, my electricity, water, and gas fees are exactly zero. Electricity in China changes by usage, but as I said, mine has never been more than $400 a month. And during summertime, when I live with air conditioning, all the time. English homes have little need for air conditioning, but they definitely need heating in winter. And when my 67-year-old brother is paying £160 a month for his electricity, I'm paying less than £45. When he's paying monthly council rates of over £200, I'm paying nothing. He gets a full pension of £950 a month from the British government. He worked there all of his life. And I only get £232 a month because I only worked 12 years. He has to pay over £400 a month in fees before he starts living. I pay less than £50 in fees before I start living. One of the things I really hated about buying property is that when I bought my first home in the UK back in 1980, the price was £24,000. It was a lot of money to me back then, so my wife and I needed to get a mortgage to pay for it. In the 7 years that we had that mortgage, we paid several £100s every month. When I sold my home in 1987 to move to Australia, I went to the bank to pay the mortgage off, and guess what? I owed the bank £24,000. That was more than I had even borrowed from them. Admittedly, the house was worth a lot more as the value had increased, but I'd already, after 7 years, paid off almost £20,000 and still owed them £24,000, and I'd paid a 15% deposit. And for the record, the rates on that home are now £1,900 a year, so every 12 years we'd be paying the same value for that home again. When a worker starts a mortgage at age 24, 25, even if they never move, they'll pay for that home at least 3 times in bank fees, interest, and council taxes before they retire. And when they retire, they will continue to pay more than 20% of what they paid for it when they bought it every year until they die. This is one of the reasons I hate capitalism. Healthcare in the UK is free. In China it isn't. So it looks like we've found a benefit to being in the UK. But in order to see a doctor, you might need to wait as long as 2 weeks. If it's this time of year, Christmas, there are holidays, and then we wait even longer. If you want to see a consultant, the waiting time is between 10 and 18 weeks. When I needed medical treatment a few months ago, I saw a doctor within an hour. I had ultrasound scans less than an hour later, saw a consultant only about 1 hour after that, and was admitted to hospital within 3 hours of presenting there. After 5 days treatment, I paid a total of 7,000 RMB, and that included my prescription charge for the next month. That's less than £800 for 5 days in treatment, the thrombosis, all the medicines, the nursing care, and enough medicine for the following month after coming out. Now, prescription charges in the UK, I have to say, are pretty good, only £9.90 per item. So in the UK, my prescription would have been just £20. In China, it was almost 70. In the US, it would have been over 500 for just 1 week's supply of one of the pills that I need to take every day. Pensioners in China come off the tax system when they retire. So instead of, as in Jane's case, the pension being about a third of normal salary, the pension's the same as the last year of working, and it's index linked to inflation, which admittedly doesn't go up very much, so neither will the pension. But the fact is, walking out the door on your 55th birthday if you're a lady, or your 60th if you're a man, you will get an increase in your income because it's the same as your salary in the last year and it's now tax-free. You'll also get free buses and metro transportation. You're going to be better off and rewarded for your working life. Now, I told you I'm 66 years old, and here's an interesting thing. I have one brother who is 5 years older than me and one who is 1 year older than me, and I retired before both of them. I have a brother who's 2 years younger than me, and he recently told me he's going to work until he's 68. He owns his own home outright, but can't afford to retire just yet, as he has too many bills to pay. China views getting old very differently. As I said, I was involved a few days ago in making a video with local media about canteens for the elderly, where a meal costs between 2 and 7 RMB maximum. That's 15 to 80 pence in the UK, 40 cents to $1.20 in Australia, and they can get lunch or dinner at the same price, or both. I asked the question, what would happen if someone came along and said, "I'm sorry, I don't have the money to pay for this"? The organizer looked at me like I was crazy. Everyone has that kind of money, but when pressed on it, he told me, well, they'd get a meal, of course, but he would also report this situation to the local social services, who would investigate why the person has no money, as there shouldn't be a single person in China who can't afford 2 to 7 RMB. If they'd been scammed or were confused or had some other legitimate reasons, then the proper authorities would be advised and those people would be cared for. It's inconceivable that someone in China wouldn't have enough to look after themselves. Either their family would be doing it, and there's a law we'll come to in a moment that requires family members to care for the elderly or handicapped relatives, or the government would do it. If there are no family members, that's when the government steps in. No one is left behind here due to old age. Now, one thing about getting old in China, there's a very strong sense, cultural sense of responsibility to look after the parents and even the grandparents. But with the family planning policy, which meant that many families only had one child, it is genuinely getting harder to do that now. But it's still very much part of the culture. However, as we all know, there are always going to be some people in society who don't always do the right thing. So China introduced a law that made it a requirement to care for your parents. If you don't, it's possible for an older person to sue a son or daughter for maintenance. And here, it's even possible for them to ask the police to get involved. No one wants the police knocking at the door to ask you to go and take care of your parents. So this law isn't used very much, and usually when it does get used, it makes national and, of course, international news headlines as something negative usually. But if we think about this, because the older person looked after the younger person or people for so many years, they fed, clothed, housed and educated them, there is and there should be a moral responsibility. Now, thanks to this law introduced in 2011, there's a legal responsibility that the younger generation provides support back. The BBC, of course, ridiculed this, but just about every Chinese person I know, and if you ask them yourselves, they'll say, this is smart. It would be very rare that this would end up in court, but it most certainly provides an option for local governments to support the elderly by imposing the costs on the family members who didn't see it as their responsibility. Now it legally is. It's never easy getting old. Things do get harder. Health deteriorates, family and friends move away or die, leaving some people lonely and alone. They're different things. I'm often alone, but I'm never lonely. I'm lucky. I'm surrounded by friends and my wife's family, and not everyone is so lucky. But if you're in China, you aren't going to be left completely alone, and you're never going to be cold or hungry. You'll never be faced with that choice, heat or eat. There is a completely new industry springing up related to aged care. It's one of the initiatives that the government is implementing to help two aspects of society, youth unemployment and an aging population. They're training willing youngsters in looking after and caring for the aging population. It's a smart move, and I will do another video on that industry in the not too distant future. But for now, that's all we have to say about getting old in China. I really hope that every single person can be as lucky as we are here in China. That's all for me today, and I will see you next time. It's now the day before Christmas Eve, so I will wish you all a very happy Christmas, and I will be back before the New Year. This will be the last one around the Christmas period. Talk to you again soon. Bye for now.